The rain came down like it wanted the whole city gone. Not the gentle kind. The kind that swallows a scream before it ever leaves the room. 4th floor. A locked bathroom door. A woman on the cold tile sends the last message she has left in her. 3 numbers, typed from memory. A prayer pointed at her mother, 300 miles south, but her thumb slips 1 digit. That is all it takes, and the message goes somewhere else. Somewhere far, somewhere it was never meant to land. She doesn't know that yet. She only knows the pounding on the door. The claw of a hammer punching through the wood, the slow, patient breathing of a man who has already decided how the night ends. And then, the strangest thing, the rain stops. The air goes still. Frost climbs the mirror. In the middle of August, because a wrong number found the wrong house, and something very old just picked up the line. The rain came down like it had a grudge. Not the soft kind. Not the kind that looks pretty through a coffee shop window while a stranger writes in a journal. This was Seattle in its meanest mood. Sheets of water slamming the glass of a 4th-floor apartment on Capitol Hill. The kind of rain that drowns out a scream. Which was convenient. For a man like Damon Cole. Mara Ellison stood in the narrow hallway with her back pressed flat against the cold drywall, 24 years old, an illustrator by trade, a woman who spent her days building bright, impossible worlds on a screen. Dragons, floating cities, skies the color of cotton candy, and here she was, trapped in a world painted entirely in gray, her palms flattened against the wall behind her. Cool, steady, the only steady thing in the room, because everything else was shaking. Her knees, her breath, the framed print that rattled on its nail every time his voice climbed. And his voice was climbing. "You think I'm stupid, Mara?" Then it dropped. That was the thing about Damon. He didn't get louder when he got dangerous. He got quieter. The way the air goes still right before a tornado. That low, that dead calm register that always came before the worst of it. "You think I don't know what you do behind my back?" She kept her hands open. Palms out, voice soft. "The way you'd talk to a wild animal you didn't want to spook, Damon. Please, because it had started over nothing. It always started over nothing. A set of car keys. Misplaced. That was the spark. And then a text had lit up her locked screen. A client. A man named Holloway. The art director on her current campaign. Asking about a deadline. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Except in Damon's head, nothing was always everything. "He's the art director," she said. "That's all. I've never even met the man. He wasn't listening. He never listened." And she watched it happen. That specific horror. The moment the man she'd once loved simply left his own eyes. And the other thing took the wheel. The veins in his neck stood up against his starched collar. His jaw set like poured concrete. His breathing changed, slow, deliberate, in through the nose. And then he moved. She threw up her arms. Pure animal instinct. Both forearms crossed in front of her face. A shield. A prayer made of bone. His hands closed on her left forearm. He didn't just grab it. That's the part people never understand. He didn't just grab. He twisted. He put his whole body into it. All 200 pounds of gym-built rage, into one violent downward wrench. And the sound? She would carry that sound for the rest of her life, for 1 second. 1 single, merciful second. She felt nothing at all. Her brain simply refused to sign for the delivery. It stopped. It blinked. It waited. Then the fire came. It shot up her arm like someone had struck a match inside her veins. White, blinding. It folded her knees and dropped her toward the floor. A scream tore out of her. Raw. Ragged. The kind of scream that scrapes juice you hollow on the way out of your throat. Her left arm hung wrong, loose. At an angle arms are not built to make, Damon stepped back. And watch what men like Damon do next. Because the rage was already gone. It couldn't hold. It burned off in a single breath. And what came in behind it was so much worse. Panic. Cheap, cowardly, scrambling panic. "Look what you made me do," he stammered. He pointed a shaking finger at her, as if the arm had broken itself, as if she'd folded her own bone out of spite. "If you just told me the truth." She didn't wait for the rest, because she knew the rest. She'd heard the rest 100 times. The rewrite. The reframe. The slow, patient work of a man teaching you that the bruise was your own idea. Cold adrenaline hit her bloodstream. Sharp. Clarifying. Just enough to move. She cradled the ruined arm against her chest, and she scrambled backward across the floor, kicking with her legs, pushing with her one good hand, sliding on the hardwood like something small and hunted that had decided, somewhere deep and old, that it was not going to die tonight. The master bathroom. She hauled herself inside, threw her shoulder into the heavy oak door, slammed it, and with her good hand, her shaking, blood-slicked hand. She threw the deadbolt. A fraction of a second later, his shoulder hit the wood from the other side. The whole door shuddered in its frame. "Open the door, Mara." The panic was gone from his voice now. That fast. Something colder had already replaced it. Something calculating. Because Damon had already moved past the thing he'd done. He was 3 steps ahead. Already writing the story. We go to the hospital. But we get it straight first. She slid down the wall, her back against the cold porcelain of the tub. "You fell. You tripped on the rug. That's it. You fell." She could barely hear him over her own breathing. Fast. Shallow. Black spots blooming at the edges of her vision. The pain was a living thing now. It filled the entire room. She was trapped in a bathroom, with a broken arm, and a man on the other side of the door who was, at that exact moment, deciding whether her silence was more useful to him than her survival. She had to reach someone. Her mother, Linda, 3 hours south in Portland, a light sleeper. A woman who kept her phone on the nightstand and answered on the first ring. Always. Every single time. For 24 years, her mother would know what to do. Her mother would call the police. Her mother would send help across 300 miles of dark highway. Mara dug into her back pocket. Pulled out the phone. The screen was already cracked. A spiderweb of fractures across the glass. But it lit up. A small blue rectangle in the dark. She'd bitten down on her own lip during the break. Hard enough to taste copper. Her thumb left a red smear on the screen. She typed the number from memory. Spiri code 5. 0. 3 except. Her thumb slipped because her whole hand was shaking, because the pain had turned her fingers into someone else's fingers. Because shock does things to a body that the body never agreed to, she hit a 4 instead of a 3. 5. 0. 4. A code from somewhere else, somewhere far. Somewhere lost in the vast humming labyrinth of cell towers and switching stations that stitched this whole country together in the dark. She didn't notice. How could she notice? Her arm was broken. A man was breaking down the door. She was not checking area codes. She was drowning. She tapped out the message. Fast. Frantic. Ignoring the typos. Ignoring everything but the words. "Mom, please." Damon lost it. "He broke my arm. I'm locked in the bathroom and he's trying to break the door down. I think he's going to hurt me. Help me." She hit send. And outside the door, the pounding stopped. The silence was worse. She could hear him breathing on the other side of the wood. Heavy. Slow. And then his voice came again. Terrifyingly, impossibly calm. "I'm going to the kitchen." To get the hammer, she stopped breathing. "If this door isn't open when I come back, I take it off the hinges. And you'll be sorry you made me." His footsteps retreated down the hall. And Mara squeezed her eyes shut and sobbed into her knees, cradling the arm that no longer worked, waiting for the reply, because her mother would reply. Instantly. Her mother always replied. The phone buzzed in her palm. She gasped, wiped her eyes with the back of her good hand, leaned into the glow to read the words that were going to save her, except the name at the top wasn't Mom. It was a string of numbers. A number she didn't recognize. And the words were not the words of a frightened mother in Portland. "I am not your mother." Mara's blood went cold. The phone nearly slipped from her sweaty grip. She read it again, as if reading it a third time might rearrange the letters into her mother's face. A wrong number. She had sent her last message on this earth, maybe. Her final desperate plea. To a stranger. To no one. To a phone in some other city, in some other life. She was alone. Completely, utterly, alone. And down the hall she heard it. A kitchen drawer. The clatter of metal on metal. His footsteps starting back. She couldn't even reach the despair. Her mind just went white. But then, on the cracked screen, 3 little dots. Typing. She held her breath. Watched those 3 gray dots pulse in the dark like a slow heartbeat, and a second message arrived. "But I am on my way." She blinked. "Do not leave the room." "Close your eyes." Mara stared at the glass. An impossible message. On my way where? Here, to this bathroom. Who was this? A stranger, hundreds of miles away, bored, cruel, playing a game with a woman about to die on the floor, because that's what it had to be. Nobody could be on their way. Nobody had her address. Sure, the phone had its location on, but a text message didn't carry a street address across the country. A civilian couldn't track a plea in real time. That wasn't a thing. That wasn't a thing that happened in the actual world. It had to be a joke. "Time's up, Mara," his voice, in the hall. Almost cheerful now. The head of the claw hammer punched clean through the center of the door. Splinters exploded into the bathroom, skittered across the tile. she screamed, pressed herself deeper into the corner, wedged herself into the gap between the toilet and the tub. Small, smaller, as small as a grown woman can make herself. A second hole tore open beside the first, and then his hand, reaching through the ruined wood, blind, groping, fingers spidering down the inside of the door. Feeling for the deadbolt, she watched it happen in frozen horror, his fingers finding the metal, closing on it, turning. The lock slid back with a soft click. The door swung open, slow, on its wrecked hinges, and Damon stepped into the frame, the hammer in his right hand, his chest heaving, his face past anger now, past rage. Something like resolve had settled over it, the face of a man who has decided to finish a job and go to bed. I told you. Not to make me, he never finished the sentence because the world changed. One moment Damon stood in the doorway, hammer raised, and the next. Everything stopped. The rain. The endless hammering rain against the windows. Gone. The hum of the refrigerator down the hall. Gone. Even the sound of Damon breathing gone. A silence dropped over the whole apartment. Thick, heavy, wrong. The kind of silence you feel in your teeth, in your chest. Like being lowered underwater. Like the entire world had been packed in wool. And the temperature fell, just fell. Straight down. Mara watched frost climb across the surface of the bathroom mirror in real time. Feathering out from the corners. Crackling. In August, in a heated apartment on the 4th floor, Damon froze. His eyes, for the first time all night, left Mara entirely. Snapped away, over his shoulder. Down the dark length of the hallway behind him. Who the hell are you? He turned, hammer up. Facing something Mara couldn't see. Something standing in the dark of her own living room. How did you get in here? A voice answered, and it did not belong to a human being. It was smooth. Impossibly smooth. Deep. Resonant. Wrapped in an accent she couldn't place. An old-world cadence with velvet laid over the top of it. It stood the hair up on her arms. It woke something reptilian at the base of her skull that started, very quietly, to scream run. A plea was issued. The voice moved closer. Unhurried, it crossed the grid. A broken bird. Crying out for its mother, a pause. And you could hear the smile in it. That was the worst part, unfortunately for you. It reached my house instead. I'm calling the cops, Damon said. And he took a step back, into the bathroom. Retreating from whatever stood out there in the dark. They would be far too slow, and then, motion. Mara's eyes could barely track it. A blur. A dark shape flowing down the hallway like ink poured into water, and a hand, pale, long-fingered, elegant as a pianist's, closing around Damon's throat. Damon, 200 pounds, 3 mornings a week at the gym, lifted clean off his feet, like a coat off a hook. No effort at all, his shoes hanging 6 inches above the tile. The hammer dropped from his hand, clattered to the floor. Useless. Damon kicked. Clawed at the wrist, crushing his throat. His mouth opened to scream. But nothing came out. Only a thin, wet gurgle. The pressure had squeezed the scream right out of him. And then the figure stepped into the light. The dim light from the bathroom vanity fell across him, and Mara stopped breathing, because he was beautiful. That was the word her stunned brain reached for. Beautiful. Terribly, wrongly beautiful. A charcoal suit, cut close to a lean and broad-shouldered frame like it had been sewn onto him. Dark hair swept back, dry, not one drop of rain on him, which was impossible on a night like this. But it was the face, high cheekbones, a jaw you could cut yourself on. Skin pale and smooth as polished marble, and his eyes. His eyes were not human eyes. The irises glowed, a deep crimson, burning in the dark like coals at the bottom of a fire that had been kept going for centuries. He held Damon in the air and did not blink. He tilted his head, a small, precise movement, and he studied the man the way a scientist studies something behind glass. With a mild, detached, almost bored kind of disgust. You snapped the bones of someone smaller than you. His voice was quiet now, almost gentle, which made it so much worse. Let us see how you enjoy the sensation. He used no weapon. He didn't need one. With his free hand, calm as a man reaching for a wine glass, he took hold of Damon's right arm, the same arm that had swung the hammer, the same arm that had broken hers. And with one small motion of his wrist, casual, he broke it. Damon's eyes bulged. A muted, choking sound forced its way through his crushed throat, pathetic, and then the man in the beautiful suit simply, let go. No, through. He threw Damon backward down the hall, like discarding something he'd finished reading. Damon's body flew, actually flew, and struck the far wall of the living room with the sound of a car folding. Plaster cracked, dust drifted down. and Damon crumpled to the floor and did not move, unconscious. Or worse. Mara couldn't tell, and in that moment, God forgive her, she could not bring herself to care. The silence came back, the thing in the beautiful suit turned around, slowly, to face the bathroom, and Mara pressed herself into the corner, shaking. Her broken arm clutched to her chest, because she understood now, with total clarity. What had actually happened here, she had traded a human monster. For something far older, she had traded an abuser. For a predator at the very top of the food chain, this was it. This was where she died, on a cold bathroom floor, in a mess of splinters and blood. He stepped through the wrecked doorway, and the strangest thing happened. The splinters, the jagged shards of the broken door, they seemed to lean away from him, as if the wood itself didn't dare snag the fine wool of his trousers. He looked down at her, and the crimson glow in his eyes began to fade. She watched it happen. The burning red bled away, softened, warmed, draining down into a deep, rich human brown, and the predator's flatness melted off his face, replaced by something she would never have believed that face capable of: gentleness. A profound and almost sorrowful gentleness. He knelt, right there on the floor, in the blood and the dirt and the wreckage of the door. This impossible creature in his tailored suit knelt down, bringing himself to her eye level. "Do not be afraid, little bird." His voice had changed completely. Velvet now, a low, warm baritone. It wrapped around her frayed nerves like a blanket. "The brute will never lay a hand on you again." She stared at him, her mind clawing at the edges of a reality that had just torn straight down the middle. "You got my text," she whispered. Her voice cracked in half. "How? My network hears many things in this city." He raised one hand, slowly, and stopped it. Inches from her skin, he was waiting. She realized it with a jolt. He was waiting for permission. When a true cry for sanctuary crosses my wires, I listen, especially when the pain is so bright. It practically screams through the code. She looked at his hand, then up at his face, and she was in agony, her body sliding toward shock. But there was something else in the room now, undeniable, a stillness rolling off him in slow waves, commanding her panic to lie down. "To be quiet for 1 minute. My arm," she sobbed, the pain cresting back over the adrenaline. "It's broken, I know." He moved closer. "With impossible care, may I?" She nodded, weakly. Barely, he took her elbow in one cool, firm hand and rested the other hand along the ruined forearm. "This will hurt for exactly 1 second. You must trust me." Before she could brace, before she could even pull in a breath, his grip tightened, and with one sharp motion he set the bones back into line. The scream came. She arched off the tile, but before the scream could finish, he brought his own wrist to his mouth and his teeth. His eye teeth lengthened, suddenly, and pierced his own pale skin. A single drop of blood welled up, and it was wrong, too dark, too thick. It caught the light and threw it back in colors that don't have names. Ruby shot through with something like oil on water. He pressed the bleeding wrist to her parted lips. "Drink." Just a drop, and she did. Instinct again. She swallowed, and it tasted like copper laced with lightning. It slid down her throat, and the whole world snapped into a terrible, sharp focus. A wave of heat surged out from her chest, down her left arm, and the pain, the blinding, absolute, all-consuming pain, was gone, just gone, replaced by a deep, crawling itch beneath her skin. 3 seconds, and then even the itch faded out. Mara gasped, yanked her arm out of his grip, stared at it, the swelling, gone, the wrong angle, gone. She flexed her fingers, one at a time, then made a fist. Nothing, no pain. Nothing at all. The bone had knitted itself whole, as if the last 10 minutes of her life had never happened. She looked up at him, her eyes wide as coins. "What?" Her voice failed her. "What are you?" He smiled, small, warm, a real thing this time. Though it never quite reached the old weariness sitting behind his eyes, he rose and held out his hand. "I am the king of this city's shadows, Mara Ellison," he said, her full name, easily, casually, though she had never once told it to him. "And you are coming with me. This place is no longer fit for you to stay." She looked past him, into the dark living room, where Damon lay crumpled and still against the broken wall. Then she looked back at the impossible, terrifying, beautiful thing, standing in her bathroom with his hand held out to her. And she should have run. Every rational part of her mind was shouting it. Run, get out. This is not rescue. This is a hook with something soft on the end of it. But she was so tired, tired of the gray, tired of the fear, tired of folding herself into corners for a man twice her size. She placed her small, healed hand into his cold one, and here is where she surprised him. because as his fingers closed around hers, as he began to lift her up, she held on. And she did not let go. And she looked up into those old, borrowed, human brown eyes. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. Her voice still shook. But underneath the shake, there was iron now, until you tell me the truth, all of it. My name, how you knew it. Why you came, he went very still. You could have let him kill me. You didn't. So that's not nothing, she swallowed. I've spent a year being lied to by a man who smiled the whole time he did it. So understand something. I would rather crawl back into that hallway and take my chances with the hammer than be handled by one more beautiful liar. For a long moment, the King of the Shadows said nothing. And then, slowly, something crossed his face she couldn't name. Surprise, maybe, or respect, or something older than either of those. You are not what I expected, he said quietly. Neither are you. She lifted her chin. Now start talking. The rain, somewhere far away, began again, softer this time. And the man knelt on that bathroom floor and told her his name. Caspian Vale, he said. That is what I am called now. It has not always been the name. But it will do. The car was a blur of quiet, velvet-lined luxury, a matte black SUV. Windows tinted so dark they seemed to swallow the city lights instead of throwing them back. It glided through the wet streets like something pulled by a ghost. No engine sound, no road noise. Just the soft hiss of tires on rain-slick asphalt and the drum of her own heart in her ears. She sat in the back. The smell of leather all around her, and under it something else, something metallic, ozone and old books, the smell of him. She kept flexing her left hand. Open, closed, waiting for the pain to come back. It never did. You said you'd tell me the truth, she said. Caspian sat beside her, a leather-bound journal closed on his knee. He didn't look at her, but she felt the whole of his attention. Fixed on her. Complete, I did. Start with the easy one. How did you know my name? That, he said, is not the easy one. She turned in the seat to face him. How did you know my name? A long pause. City lights sliding blue and gold across his marble face. Because I have been listening a long time, he said. There is a grid beneath this city, Mara. Beneath every city. Not the one made of wires and towers. Another one. Older. A grid of need, of pain. Of the last signals people send when they have run all the way out of everyone else. His eyes found hers. I hear them all. Every real cry for help in the city passes through me. Most I let go. Most are not mine to answer, but mine was. Yours reached me directly. A wrong number, they will tell you. A slip of the thumb. 504 instead of 503. He almost smiled. I do not believe in wrong numbers. In a very long life, I have learned that the most important threads of a person are usually spun out of their mistakes. She let that sit in the dark of the car. Absorbed it. Believed it, somehow. The way you believe things at 3 a.m. after your whole world has already cracked open once. And Damon, she said. You said he'd never touch me again. But you didn't kill him. I saw him breathing. Caspian's jaw tightened. Just slightly. No, I did not kill him. Why not? He was quiet a moment, and when he spoke, there was something careful in it. Something guarded, because I have a rule. I answer the cry. I stop the harm. But I am not an executioner. The moment I let myself become one is the moment I become no better than the things I hunt. He looked out the window. He will wake. His memory of tonight will be broken into pieces. My people will see to that, and he will be handled by the mortal world. In the mortal way, but she was watching his face when he said it, and she saw the flicker. The small thing he wasn't saying, because she'd spent a year learning to read the space between a man's words. You're not sure, she said slowly. You're not sure it worked? His silence was the only answer she needed, and neither of them knew it yet. But 3 miles away, in a bed on the 7th floor of Harborview Medical Center, Damon Cole was already stirring, his shattered right arm. The one Caspian had snapped like a dry branch, wrapped now in fresh white plaster. And under that cast, in the dark, against every law of human medicine, the bone had begun to knit fast, far too fast, because when Caspian's hand had closed around Damon's throat, when that ancient, impossible blood had run hot through the king's fingers, a single drop had found the split in Damon's lip, where the man had bitten down against the pain, just a drop, the same drop that had healed Mara's arm in 3 seconds flat. And Damon Cole opened his eyes in the dark, and flexed the fingers of a hand that should not have moved for 6 weeks. And they moved. He didn't understand it. Not yet. He understood only one thing. One thing burning bright in the wreckage of everything else. Someone had taken what was his. And he was going to get it back. The Vale estate did not so much appear as reveal itself. The SUV turned off the highway, onto a private road that cut into the dense black pines of the Pacific Northwest. Fog rolled thick off the water, and then a gate, wrought iron, massive, rising out of the mist like it has been standing there 1,000 years. It swung open without a single hand touching it, and the house. Mara pressed her palm to the cold window and stared. It sat perched on a cliff, above the churning dark water of Puget Sound. Gothic stone and glass, ancient and impossibly modern all at once. Warm amber light glowed from 100 tall windows, and instead of looking cold, instead of looking like a place a monster would live, it looked like a lighthouse. It looked, God help her, like coming home. "This is where I keep the people the world has forgotten how to protect," Caspian said quietly, as the car rolled to a stop. "For as long as they need it. It is very hard to find, harder still to enter uninvited. Both the mortal world and the other one tend to lose the trail somewhere in those trees." She should have been afraid. She'd been afraid all night, all year, maybe her whole life. But as she stepped out of the car, into the cold, clean, pine-sharp air, with her healed arm swinging free at her side, and the great warm house rising up in front of her, Mara Ellison felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. She felt the fear loosen its grip on her, just slightly, just enough. She followed him up the stone steps, toward the light, and far behind her, in a city drowning in rain, a broken man was pulling the IV from his own arm, already asking a nurse, in a voice that didn't sound quite like his own, which hospital they'd take a woman with a shattered forearm on the night of a bad storm. The wrong number had been sent. The king had answered. And somewhere out in the dark, a debt older than both of them had begun, very quietly, to wake up. The first thing Mara learned about living in a house full of shadows was that the shadows had opinions. 3 weeks. That was how long she'd been at the Vale estate. 3 weeks of waking in a bed the size of her old apartment. 3 weeks of morning fog rolling off the sound. 3 weeks of a life so soft, so quiet, so safe, that it felt like a costume she hadn't earned the right to wear. They'd given her a studio. That was the part that undid her. A whole room, south-facing, flooded with light, easels and brushes and pigments she'd only ever read about. Caspian had built it without asking, just handed her the key one morning, and watched her face when the door swung open, and she'd cried. Right there, in front of the king of the shadows. Because in 24 years no one had ever looked at the thing she loved, and decided that it mattered, so she painted, and in the evenings. She talked long conversations by the library fire, him in a leather chair that had probably held 100 years of him. Her curled up on the rug like a cat, and she'd ask him things, impossible things. What the world smelled like before there were cars. Whether he remembered the first electric light he ever saw, whether it had frightened him. "Everything frightened me once," he said. You lose the habit, and she almost believed him. That nothing frightened him anymore, until the night she found out that wasn't true at all. She wasn't sleeping. The thing she hadn't told him, because ever since that single drop of blood had slid down her throat on a broken bathroom floor, ever since her arm had knit itself whole in 3 seconds, something in her had come loose. Some door she couldn't find, left standing open, and through it came the voices. Not loud, not at first, a whisper on the edge of sleep. A woman crying somewhere she couldn't see. A child's fear, sharp and small, a man's last slow thought dissolving into nothing. She'd sit up in the dark, heart slamming, certain someone was standing in the room, but no one was ever in the room, because the voices weren't in the room. She was starting to understand that now. They were in the grid, the old grid, the one made of need. She could hear it. She. A 24-year-old illustrator from Portland who'd never so much as had a premonition, could hear the whole aching hum of a city's pain, and she didn't know what it meant, except that it meant something. Because you do not drink a monster's blood and walk away the same. She just hadn't told him yet. Because, and she was a little ashamed of this, a small, stubborn part of her wanted one thing that was hers. One secret, one corner of this gilded fortress that belonged to her, and not to the king who had handed her everything else. So she kept it, for now. But the grid, it turned out, did not like to be kept quiet. Because the night after she noticed the voices getting stronger, she noticed something else, a pattern in them. Certain threads that pulsed near the house, certain cold presences that moved through the halls, and one thread in particular, silver bright, watchful, that seemed to circle her studio door. She didn't have a name for it yet. She would. Soon enough. The garden was where the woman found her. It was late. Fog everywhere, the kind that turns the whole world into a held breath. Mara had gone out to walk it off. The voices had been loud that night, and Caspian was away. Attending, he'd said, to the affairs of the city, which she'd learned meant something she probably didn't want a full accounting of. And that was when the temperature dropped. She knew that feeling now. That specific chill. It meant one of them was near, so you're the pet. The voice came from behind her, and Mara turned. The woman was tall, regal, hair like spun silver falling past her shoulders, and eyes, pale, glittering, cold as the inside of a freezer. She moved through the fog like she owned the very air she walked through. Heels clicking on the wet stone, slow, deliberate. Circling, the one who summoned the king with a text message, a smile that didn't touch her eyes. How quaint. How very pathetic. Mara stood her ground, which surprised her. The old Mara would have folded, would have apologized for taking up space. But something in 3 weeks of safety had straightened her spine. I'm not a pet. I'm a guest, the woman laughed. A sound like a wine glass cracking down its side. Caspian doesn't keep guests, girl. She stepped closer, and the cold rolled off her in waves. He keeps curiosities. Things that amuse him. Until the boredom sets back in. And believe me, the boredom always sets back in. He has lived a very long time. What could you possibly offer that he has not already tasted 1,000 times over? He saved my life. He played the hero. She was inside Mara's space now, close enough that the chill bit through her sweater. He feeds on being needed. It is the only thing that still feeds him at all. But the day you become a liability, the day the human world comes sniffing down the trail he left behind him in that apartment, he will set you down as easily as he set down your little hammer-swinging boyfriend. And here is the thing: the old Mara, the Mara from the gray apartment, would have crumbled, would have swallowed every word as gospel. But the new Mara, the Mara who could hear the grid, was listening, not to the words, to the thing running underneath them, because Mara had spent 1 full year in a house with a man who lied for a living, and she had learned, she had learned, that the surface of a lie is always smooth, but underneath it, there is a texture, a snag, a reason. And this woman, this beautiful, poisonous woman, had a reason. You want something, Mara said. The silver-haired woman went still. Excuse me, you didn't come out here into the fog at midnight to warn a pet. People who don't care don't bother to circle you in a garden. Mara's heart was hammering, but her voice held level. You're not warning me away from him. You're trying to move me off a square, because I'm standing in the way of something you want. For 1/2 second, 1 flicker, the mask slipped and Mara saw it, a flash of pure, cold fury. The fury of someone who has just been read like an open book. Get out of the garden. The voice boomed across the fog, deep, furious Caspian. He stood at the edge of the pergola, a darkness crackling off him, something Mara had only seen once before. On the night they met, the woman didn't flinch. She smiled, a thin, cruel line. I was only welcoming the new addition, Caspian. She bowed her head, mocking, and slipped past him into the shadows, gone. He crossed the garden in 3 long strides, and the fury drained from his face the instant his eyes landed on Mara. Replaced by something raw, did she hurt you? No, Mara studied him. She said, I'm a hobby to you, a thing you keep. Until you get bored. His jaw tightened. Her name is Isolde. She is a creature of pure malice. She cannot understand what she does not possess, and she cannot stand that for the first time in an age. I have found myself. Anchored, he reached out, took her face in his hands. His thumbs traced her cheekbones, and his touch was warmer than the night around them. You are not a hobby. You are the first thing in this long, cold life that has made me want to be awake before the sun goes down, and it was a beautiful thing to say. It was. But Mara, standing there in the fog, with his cool hands on her warm face, was still hearing the snag in Isolde's voice, because Isolde wanted her gone. And Isolde was afraid, and people are only afraid of the things that can take what they want. She started paying attention after that. That was the second thing she learned about the house, that it was full of doors she hadn't opened yet, and now she started opening them. Not the literal ones, the other kind. The doors in conversations, the gaps in stories, the names people stopped saying the moment she walked into a room. And she used the grid, because she'd figured out something about the voices. They weren't just noise. They were a sense, a new one. And like any new muscle, it grew stronger the more she leaned on it. She'd close her eyes by the library fire, and she'd reach, out past the walls, into the hum, and she could feel threads, intentions, the exact shape of a lie. It felt like the first real power she'd ever held in her hands. And one night, she reached toward Isolde. She shouldn't have. She knew that even as she did it, but she wanted the truth. And the truth was that Isolde was hiding something the size of a house, so she closed her eyes by the fire. And she reached. And what she found chilled her to the bone because threading out from Isolde, faint but unmistakable, was a line. A signal. Going out, past the walls, past the wards, out into the mortal world, to someone. A group of someones. People who dealt in the old knowledge. People who hunted things like Caspian for a living. Isolde was talking to hunters. Isolde was feeding them. And the thing she was feeding them, the bait, the lure, the one loose thread they could pull, was Mara. She confronted her in the East Wing, foolish, maybe. But Mara had run all the way out of patience for other people's games. I know what you're doing. Isolde turned from the window, unhurried. Do you, little bird? Don't call me that. That's his name for me. Mara's hands were shaking. She didn't let them stop her. You're feeding me to the hunters. A location. A pattern. Something. Because if I'm the thing that breaks his cover, then it's my fault when it all comes down. Not yours. Isolde's smile faded, and what replaced it was worse. Because it was honest. You clever little thing, she breathed. He didn't tell you what you are to him, did he? He didn't tell you why he came running. He came because I called. He came because you called with her voice. The words landed like a slap. What? But Isolde was already moving toward the door. Silver hair catching the moonlight. Ask him about the girl he was too late to save, she said. And then ask yourself why a man who has ignored 10,000 cries for help came racing across a city. For yours. And she was gone. But Isolde had made one mistake. She had assumed that Mara would sit on the knowledge, that she would carry it quietly, that she would let the poison do its work. She had assumed wrong. Because Mara did not go looking for Caspian to weep. She went looking for him to warn him. She found him in the war room beneath the house, and she laid it all out, flat, clear, the signal, the hunters, the bait. Every thread she'd followed in the dark behind her own eyes. Caspian listened, and his face went from stone to fury, to something very old and very tired. How long have you known you could do this? He said quietly. Read the grid. Follow a thread to its source. She hesitated. 3 weeks. Since the blood, he closed his eyes. Just for a moment, and when he opened them, there was grief in them. But there was no time for it. Then we settle Isolde tonight, he said, before she can hand them the last piece. They settled it in the great hall. Caspian did not send others to do it. That surprised her. He went himself, down the long stone corridors of his own house, to a set of rooms Isolde had been given 3 centuries ago, and Mara followed. Because she was done being left in other rooms while men decided things, Isolde was waiting. Of course she was. She'd felt them coming, and she stood in the center of her chamber, silver hair loose, a small, cruel smile on her mouth, like a woman who had been rehearsing this scene for a very long time. You'll thank me eventually, she said. When you're free of her. When you remember what you are, I remember exactly what I am, Caspian said. That is the problem. You never understood the difference between us, Isolde. You think I hunt because I am a predator. I hunt because I remember being prey. Sentiment, she spat. Survival, he said. And then the grid lit up. Mara felt it before she saw it. Isolde's intention snapping taut, reaching. Not for a weapon, for a signal. One last transmission, the final coordinates, the one piece of information that would turn a suspicion into an address the hunters could drive to. She was going to send it. Right now. In front of them. Because she thought she was fast enough, and she would have been. Against Caspian, who had to cross the room, but not against Mara, who didn't, because Mara had learned something in 3 weeks of listening, that the grid was made of intention, and that a message is just an intention with a direction, and that she had spent her whole life having other people's intentions forced onto her. And she was very, very good, it turned out, at refusing them. She closed her eyes, and she reached out, and she found the taut, humming thread of Isolde's transmission, already leaving, already halfway out into the dark, and she grabbed it, and she pulled it back. Isolde's eyes went wide. Her hand flew to her own temple. The signal collapsed, folded in on itself, died before it cleared the walls of the house. What? Isolde breathed, staring at Mara now, really staring, for the first time. Not at a pet, not at a curiosity, at a threat. What are you? I'm the thing you should have been afraid of, Mara said, and Caspian crossed the room. He did not kill her. He never did. But he took hold of the schemes she'd spent 300 years weaving, and he unmade the trust that had let her walk his halls. And he called for the old ones who kept the house, and Isolde was taken away, somewhere far, somewhere she could do no more harm, to be dealt with by their kind, in their way. And then it was just the two of them again. In the emptied room, you should have told me, Mara said. About the grid, about what I can do. You knew, didn't you? You've known this whole time, I suspected. And Isolde said, she stopped, made herself say it. She said I called with someone else's voice. A girl. Someone you were too late to save. She told me to ask you why. Caspian went very still, and Mara watched the last of the king drain out of his face, and what was left was just a very old man, standing in a room full of the past. Then I will tell you, he said. All of it. But not here. He led her back to the library, to the fire, to the leather chair that had held 100 years of him, and he told her about the year everything broke. It was a long time ago, a bad year. A sickness was moving through the cities, the flu. It was killing more people than the war just ended had killed in the trenches. The city was full of the dying and full of the desperate, and I was. Younger then, in the ways that matter. I still believed I could save everyone, that what I could do was a gift, and not a sentence. He looked into the fire. There was a girl. She sent out a cry, a true one. From the very bottom of everything, and I heard it, and I hesitated. Why? Because answering it meant crossing a powerful man, a dangerous one. And I told myself I would go the next night, that she could wait one night. His voice went flat, dead. She could not wait one night. Mara didn't breathe. By the time I reached her, she was gone. And I made a promise, on whatever a thing like me has left to swear on, that I would never hesitate again, that I would never again let a single night stand between a cry and my answer. He finally looked at her. That is why I came, Mara. That is the only reason. Not because you sound like a ghost, not because you wear anyone's face, but because 100 years ago I was too late for a frightened girl, and you called. And I would not be too late twice. And there it was, the truth she'd been chasing. And it was not the cruel version. Isolde had bent it, twisted it into something ugly. He hadn't come because Mara was a photograph he was trying to bring back to life. He came because he could not stand to make the same mistake a second time. There's more, she said softly, isn't there? The powerful man. The one you'd have had to cross? Caspian nodded slowly. I crossed him in the end. Too late to save the girl, but not too late to make an enemy for a century. He met her eyes. His name does not matter anymore, but he had a brother, and the brother is still walking the earth, waiting for the day I finally let someone close enough to be used against me. The fire popped, and now, Caspian said quietly, I have. They came 4 nights later, not with guns. That was the first surprise. Mara had braced for guns, for men in tactical gear kicking down doors. Instead, they came with symbols. Mara woke to a sound like the whole house holding its breath. She ran to the window and out in the fog. Past the tree line, small lights had begun to appear, blue, cold, wrong, burning in patterns on the ground, on the trees, on the very air itself. Wards, Caspian called them when she found him. Ancient traps woven into the land, designed not to kill him. Not yet, designed to cage him, to bleed off his strength. Slowly, patiently, he's not trying to break in, Caspian said, watching the lights spread through the dark. He's building a box. And when the box is finished, he'll come, Mara said. You keep saying he. Give him a name, Garrett. Caspian's voice was low. The brother. He has hunted me for 100 years. He is not like the mercenaries. Not the men with silver bullets and forums on the internet. Those I can handle. Garrett is something else. Garrett is patient. Garrett has waited a century for exactly this, for me, for anyone I let matter. Yes, he didn't soften it. She was glad he didn't. You did not do this, Mara. I did. 100 years ago. This bill was always going to come due. It simply waited for a reason, and you gave it one by being someone I could not lose. And then came the second surprise, the one that changed everything. Because Caspian raised a hand toward the nearest ward, the way she'd watched him do 100 impossible things. A casual gesture, a king dismissing a nuisance, and nothing happened. He tried again, his jaw set, and Mara saw it. The strain, the tremor, the sweat on the brow of a man she'd been certain could not sweat. And then she saw the blood, a thin line of it, running from his nose. Dark, too dark. He wiped it away and looked at his own hand like he didn't recognize it. Caspian. There is silver in the wards, he said. His voice rough, bound into the pattern. It is bleeding me, and Mara understood in that instant something that flipped the whole world on its axis. He wasn't invincible. She'd watched him lift a 200-pound man with one hand, watched him snap bone like a matchstick, watched him heal her shattered arm with a single drop of blood, and somewhere in 3 weeks of safety she'd let herself believe, the way you let yourself believe about a father. Or a fortress, that he simply could not be hurt, and now he was bleeding from the nose in his own war room, because even the King of the Shadows had a limit, and Garrett had found it. It got worse over the next 2 nights. The box tightened, the wards multiplied, and with every hour, Mara watched Caspian dim, just slightly, the color leaching out of him, the speed leaving his movements. That old, terrible power banking down like a fire running out of wood to burn. And she watched him hide it. That was the part that broke her heart. He hid it from her, straightened when she came into the room, steadied his voice, played the king, because a man like that, a protector to his very bones, would rather die standing than let the person he'd sworn to protect see him kneel. She knew that instinct. She'd spent a year hiding her own bruises so no one would worry about her, and she was not going to let him do it alone. So on the 3rd night, when the wards burned brightest, and Caspian sat gray-faced and silent by a fire that no longer seemed to warm him at all, Mara made a decision. There's someone who can help, Caspian had said once, weeks ago, in passing, a name he clearly hadn't wanted to say out loud. An old friend. From before all this, he knows the old craft, the counterwork. If it ever came to that, Aldous, she said now, in the firelight. You said his name was Aldous. Caspian's head came up. Slow. No, you can't reach him. You can barely stand. The wards are keyed to you. The second you cross that line, they cut you in half, Mara. No, but they're not keyed to me. She was already pulling on her coat. Her hands, for once, were not shaking. I'm not one of you. I paint for a living. The wards won't even see me. I can walk right through them. And I can hear the grid now. I can feel my way to him. He stood, too fast, and swayed, and caught himself on the mantel, and that right there, was the whole argument, made in a single stagger. You don't understand what's out there, he said. No, she agreed. But I understand what's in here. She crossed the room to him, and she took his cold face in her warm hands, the way he had once taken hers, and she made him look at her. You crossed a whole city for me, on a promise you made to a girl 100 years ago, because you couldn't stand to be too late again. Her voice dropped. So don't ask me to sit by the fire and be too late for you. For a long moment, the only sound was the fire, and the low hum of the wards, and the sea beating itself against the cliffs far below, and then the King of the Shadows, who had never in his long life let anyone walk into danger on his behalf, opened his eyes and nodded. She left through the wine cellar. There was a passage there, old, forgotten. It led out in the trees beyond the first ring of wards, and she stepped out into the cold black forest, alone, on foot, with nothing but a coat and a strange new sense humming behind her eyes. The wards glowed all around her, blue, cold, malevolent, and Caspian had been right about one thing. They didn't see her. She walked between them, under them, right through the middle of a cage built for a king. And they never so much as flickered, because she painted for a living, which was... She was beginning to understand its own kind of power. She closed her eyes and reached out along the grid, past Garrett's patient, waiting thread, past a second thread she recognized with a lurch, Damon's, burning somewhere out there in the dark, closer than it had any right to be. She filed that away. She'd deal with it later, and she reached further, searching for something older, warmer, a signal she'd never felt, but somehow knew she'd recognize, and there, faint, miles off, toward the city, a steady, flickering light, like a candle set in a window, an old man's kindness, humming quietly in the dark. Aldous, the forest, did not want her there. That was the feeling. All through the long walk down out of the pines, every branch a hand, every shadow a held breath, the fog so thick she could taste it. Cold and green and old, but she kept walking, because behind her a king was dying by degrees, and ahead of her, somewhere in the sleeping city, was a candle in a window she'd only ever felt. Never seen. She walked for 2 hours, maybe 3. She lost track. She came down off the cliffs, through a dead quiet suburb, past dark houses full of people who had no idea what walked their streets tonight, and into the older part of the city. Brick, ivy, street lamps that buzzed and flickered, and the candle got brighter, until she was standing in front of a narrow shop, wedged between a shuttered bakery and a laundromat. A hand-painted sign faded almost to nothing. No name on it. Just a symbol she didn't recognize but somehow knew. The same shape that had glowed in the wards. Except turned inside out. Turned kind. The door opened before she touched it. "You walked," said a voice from the dark inside, dry, amused, old as gravel, through Garrett's wards, on foot, in the middle of the night, a pause. He always did underestimate the small doors. Mara stepped inside. The shop was a lifetime of clutter. Books stacked to the ceiling, jars of things she didn't want to name. And in the middle of it, in a chair that seemed grown up out of the floor, sat an old man, truly old, human old, white hair, spotted hands, eyes gone pale at the rim the way old men's eyes go pale, a cardigan with a hole worn through the elbow, and he was drinking tea. He did not look like a man who could save anyone, which, Mara was starting to learn, was usually the whole point. "You're Aldous, I'm what's left of him," he gestured at the chair across from his own. "Sit, you're about to fall down, and I'm far too old to catch you," she sat. "He's dying. Caspian, the wards. There's silver in them. He's bleeding. He can't. I know what silver does to him, girl. I'm the one who taught him how to survive it. The first time, he sipped his tea, unbothered, which made her want to scream. 60 years I've known that creature. Watched him bury more people than you have ever met, including, once, very nearly himself. Then help him. Aldous set down the cup. That depends on whether you understand what you're actually asking for, and what it's going to cost. I don't care what it costs. I'll pay it." And the old man looked at her then, truly looked, those pale eyes moving across her face, and what she saw in them stopped her cold pity. "Oh, child," he said softly, "you already have." He made her drink tea first, insisted on it. Bitter, black, foul stuff, and while she drank it, he watched her hands. "Do they shake?" "No, not anymore. Do you sleep?" "No. Do you hear things? In the dark?" "On the edge of it. Voices that aren't in the room." Mara went very still. "How did you know that?" Aldous leaned back, and something in his face sagged. Like a man setting down a weight he'd hoped never to have to carry again, because I've seen it once before, a very long time ago. There was a girl, and Caspian, being young and arrogant and full of grief, did a thing he'd sworn he would never do again. He looked into the small fire in his grate, and I think he is doing it again now, and I don't think he even knows that he is. Doing what? Tell me what happened, girl, the night he found you. Every part, especially the part with the blood, so she told him, the bathroom, the hammer, the broken arm hanging wrong against her chest, and then Caspian, the wrist, the bite, the single drop pressed to her lips. Drink. Just a drop, and the way the pain had vanished. And the itch beneath her skin, 3 seconds. Gone. Aldous closed his eyes while she talked, and by the time she finished, his old hands were gripping the arms of his chair. White at the knuckles, 1 drop, yes, to close a wound like that, a shattered arm. In seconds, he shook his head slowly. "You don't understand what that is, do you? He didn't tell you." "Of course he didn't tell you. Tell me what?" And the old man opened his eyes. "His blood doesn't heal, child. Not really. It's not a cure, it's a bridge. It builds a road. From his world into yours." He tapped his own chest with 1 crooked finger. "And once that road is built, something has to cross it, in one direction. Or the other." Mara's mouth went dry. "What does that mean?" "It means the blood is inside you now, working. It fixed your arm because that is the first thing it does. A promise, of a sort, a down payment. But it doesn't stop there. It never stops. It's changing you, a little more every night. That's the voices. That's the sleeplessness. That's the grid opening up behind your eyes." He leaned forward. "It's turning you into him, slowly. And you have, I would guess, a little time yet." "How little?" "Days, girl, not weeks. Days." He held her eyes so she couldn't look away. "The change is nearly finished. You've been walking toward the edge of it for a month without knowing. You're close now. Close enough that I can smell it on you like frost. The room tilted. What happens when it finishes? One of 2 things." He held up a single spotted finger. 1. You drink again. Fully, this time. Not a drop. All of it. And you cross the bridge. And you become what he is. And you go on. A second finger. 2. You don't. And the bridge, half-built, collapses. And it takes you down with it." His hand fell back to his lap. "That is the polite way of saying that it kills you. And it will not be quick. And it will not be kind." Silence. The fire popped in the grate. And somewhere very far away, Mara heard herself ask the question in a voice that didn't sound like hers. When was he going to tell me? Aldous didn't answer. Which was its own answer. When was he going to tell me, Aldous? I don't think he was. I think he meant to wait, until the choice made itself. until you were sick enough, scared enough. That drinking felt like a rescue instead of a cage, because that's the coward's mercy, isn't it? To never once hold the knife, to just let the wound get bad enough that the person begs you to cut. And Mara Ellison, who had spent 1 full year with a man who rewrote her reality one gentle lie at a time, felt something in her chest turn to stone, because she knew that particular kind of love. The kind that decides for you. The kind that keeps you in the dark for your own good. The kind that calls control by the name of protection. She had run 3 states and swallowed a monster's blood to escape it, and it had followed her all the way here. "Will you help him?" she said. Her voice flat now, emptied out. Yes, Aldous rose, old bones creaking. "Not for him, for you, because a debt is a debt, and I've owed that creature mine for 60 years, and I would rather clear it helping the girl he lied to." Then the king who lied, he shuffled to a shelf, began pulling down jars. "The wards can be broken, from the inside. There's a counter pattern. Salt and iron and a word or two I'll teach you on the way. It'll drop the silver long enough for him to move. But it has to be done at the center. At the very heart of the cage, the house, he began stuffing things into a canvas bag. "So we're walking straight back into the trap you just walked out of. Wonderful." At my age, he looked at her. "You should know. Garrett won't wait. He'll have felt you leave, and he'll take that for weakness. He'll come tonight. He'll bring the mercenaries, and he'll bring your hammer-swinging friend. Because a man that angry is a very useful tool." Mara's head came up. "Damon, you didn't wonder how a hunter as old and careful as Garrett found the one hidden house in this whole gray city." He slung the bag over his shoulder. "Your Damon has a little of the king in him now, a single drop. Same as you had. Not enough to change him, but enough to make him findable. Trackable. A compass needle pointing straight at the thing he's obsessed with. Garrett didn't find that house, girl. He met her eyes. Damon led him to it. And Damon doesn't even know that he did. They took Aldis's car. An ancient brown thing that smelled of tobacco and dust. And as it climbed back up into the pines, Mara stared out the window at the fog and made herself small around the stone in her chest because she had a choice to make. And every version of it was a trap: drink, become a monster, live forever, in a house of shadows, chained to a man who had already proven he'd lie to keep her. Don't drink, die, slowly, in a matter of days, just when she'd finally started to want to live, or there was no or. That was the thing about a good trap. It closes every door but 2, and paints both of them the same color. "You're doing the math," Aldous said, not looking away from the road. "I can hear it from here. There's no good answer." "No," he downshifted as the road steepened. "But there's a difference between choosing a bad thing and having a bad thing chosen for you. It is the whole difference in the world, actually, and it may be the only difference that has ever mattered." He glanced at her. "He took that from you, the choosing. So whatever else you decide tonight, take it back." And Mara Ellison, 24 years old, watched the blue glow of the wards rise up through the trees ahead, and decided that whatever happened after this, she was done being decided for. The house was already under siege when they arrived. They didn't go in the front. Aldous knew the small doors, too. He pulled the car off into the trees a quarter mile out, and they went the rest of the way on foot. And Mara felt it before she saw it. The grid was screaming, Damon's thread, burning, close, Garrett's, cold and patient, and everywhere at once, and a dozen others. New, mortal, frightened but greedy, mercenaries, men who had taken money to hunt a nightmare and didn't quite believe in it yet. They were going to believe in it very soon, and through all of it, under all of it. One thread going dim, flickering, guttering like a candle in a draught Caspian. "Hurry," Mara breathed. They came out of the trees at the cliff's edge, and there was the house. And Mara's heart seized in her chest, because the 100 amber lights that had looked like a lighthouse on the night she arrived were dark. Everyone. Snuffed out, and the wards blazed all around it now. A ring of cold blue fire, so bright it hurt to look at directly, and beyond the ring, on the wide stone drive, under a sky the color of a bruise, stood the men, 10 of them. 12 in dark gear, carrying canisters that hissed with silver mist, and at their center, 2 figures, one she didn't know, tall, still, ancient in a way she could feel from across the whole clearing, a long gray coat, a face like a closed door. Garrett, and beside him. Gaunt now, hollowed out, his right arm, the one Caspian had broken, hanging whole and healed at his side, his eyes wide, lit from within by something that had eaten the rest of him alive. "Give her back," Damon screamed, and his voice tore across the drive. "She's mine. Give her back." And from the dark doorway of the house, a voice answered low, rough, but unbroken. "She belongs to no one, Cole Caspian." Stepping out into the ward light, swaying, bleeding from the nose, gray as ash, but standing. God, still standing. "Least of all to you and Garrett." Silent all this while, raised one gloved hand, and the mercenaries fired. The silver mist filled the air, acrid, burning. It rolled across the drive in a wave, and Caspian walked into it. Mara wanted to scream, wanted to run. Aldous' old hand clamped down on her shoulder like a vice. "Not yet. The center. We have to reach the heart of the wards. His fight is the distraction. Ours is the real one. Move," and they ran, along the tree line, around the edge of the blazing ring, toward the old wine cellar door. While out on the drive, the impossible happened, because Caspian, dying, poisoned, bleeding from every soft place in his body, walked through the silver mist, and it seared him. She could see it searing him from across the clearing, and he did not slow down. He crossed the whole drive in a handful of terrible seconds. And he reached Damon first, not Garrett. Damon, because Caspian understood something Garrett didn't, that the tool is not the hand that holds it, and that mercy, sometimes, wears the face of the thing that looks like cruelty. He caught Damon's wrist, and he pressed his other hand flat to Damon's forehead. And even at a dead run, Mara felt it ripple across the grid because Caspian reached into Damon Cole's mind and began to take it apart. The cellar door was locked. "Of course it was. Move," Aldous grunted, and produced from his bag a length of iron and a fistful of gray salt and a low string of words in a language that made Mara's teeth ache. The lock gave with a groan. They plunged into the dark. Down stone steps slick with damp, through the wine cellar, into the war room beneath the house. Here, Aldous dropped to his knees at the center of the stone floor, the heart of it. Every ward is tied here, to the foundation. You anchor the cage to the very thing you're caging. His old hands moved fast now, drawing shapes in salt, laying iron in lines. "You'll say the last part, not me. It has to be a living voice, fully human. And I'm most of the way out the door already. Tell me what to say," he told her. 6 words, old ones, heavy ones. She didn't understand them. She didn't have to, and she was drawing breath to speak them. When the cellar door at the top of the stairs blew off its hinges, Damon came down the stairs like something falling. His right arm hung wrong again. And his eyes. God, his eyes. There was almost nothing left in them now. Caspian had gotten into his mind, started pulling it apart, and then the fight had dragged the king away, half finished, leaving Damon emptied, but not gone. A hollow man running on the last dregs of a single obsession, Mara, and her name in his mouth was the worst thing she had ever heard, because there was no memory left behind it. Just the shape of a hunger that had outlived the man who felt it. Aldous. Say the words. Can't. Living. Fully human. "It has to be you, girl. It has to be you," and Damon lunged, and Mara Ellison did not throw up her arms this time. She'd done that once, on a night in a gray apartment. Both forearms crossed in front of her face. A shield. A prayer. Not tonight. Because 3 weeks of hearing the grid had taught her something. That you can feel a thing coming before it comes. And she felt Damon's lunge a half second before his body made it. And she was not where he expected her to be. He crashed past her. Into the wall. And she was already turning. Already dropping to her knees at the center of the salt and iron. And she opened her mouth to say the words. And Damon's good hand closed around her ankle and yanked. She went down hard. The salt scattered. The pattern broke. And Damon dragged her back across the stone floor by her leg. And she clawed at the ground. And it was the bathroom all over again. It was the hammer through the door all over again. It was every nightmare she had run 3 states to escape. Except it wasn't. Because in the bathroom, she'd had nothing. And now she had the grid. Mara stopped clawing at the floor, and she closed her eyes, and she reached. Not out this time. Into Damon, into the burning, hollowed-out thread of him, and she found, in the wreckage Caspian had left behind, the one thing still holding him together, the obsession. Her, the idea of her as a thing that he owned, and she took hold of it. She didn't know she could do this. She was terrified of doing this. But she was done. So completely done being the thing that got dragged across floors, and she pulled. Not the way Caspian pulled. She didn't have his centuries, his precision. She pulled like a woman yanking a blade out of her own back. Clumsy, furious, whole, and the obsession, the last load-bearing wall of Damon Cole, came out. His hand went slack on her ankle. His mouth fell open, And the thing that had been Damon, the rage, the ownership, the smiling, patient cruelty, went out of his eyes like a light being switched off. He sat down, right there on the cellar floor, in the scattered salt, and he looked at his own hands like he had never seen them before. And then he looked at Mara. "Where?" he said. Small, confused, a child's voice in a grown man's body. "Where am I?" And Mara Ellison, looking at the wreckage of the man who had broken her arm, felt no triumph at all, only a vast, gray, exhausted grief, and, strangely, unbearably, for him, for the empty shell sitting in the salt. Because whatever had twisted him into a man who broke the things he loved, there was nothing left of it now to even hate. "Go," she whispered. "Just go." And the hollow man rose and climbed the broken stairs and walked out into the night, with no name, no past, and no memory of the woman whose arm he had once folded in half. He was never seen again. The words, "Girl," Aldous' voice cracked across the cellar. "Now!" Mara scrambled back to the broken pattern, swept the salt into its lines, laid the iron straight, and Aldous, gasping against the wall, nodded once, and Mara Ellison spoke the 6 old words into the heart of the cage, and the house screamed. That was the only way she could describe it. A sound felt more than heard, the wards. All of them. Every cold blue fire ringing the estate, guttered, flickered, and went out. The silver died in the air, the cage broke. Above them, on the drive, Caspian Vale felt it happen. Felt the crushing weight of the silver lift off his poisoned body all at once. Felt the strength come roaring back into his limbs like a tide returning to a shore, and Garrett felt it too. The old hunter had been circling Caspian in the dying mist, patient, certain, waiting for the wards to finish their slow work. A century of hunting coming down to these last few moments, and then the wards went out, and the thing he'd cornered. The bleeding, blistered, dying king stood up straight, and his eyes, which had gone dim and human and gray, flooded once more with that deep crimson. Twin dying stars, reignited. "Ah," said Garrett quietly, his first word all night, almost admiring. "There you are, and the two of them, the king and the hunter, 100 years of blood standing between them, came together in the dark under a bruise-colored sky." Mara ran up the cellar stairs, Aldous shouting behind her to wait, to stay down, to not be a fool. She was going to be a fool. She came out into the great hall just as the front doors blew inward, and there, at the top of the grand staircase, under a skylight full of a red and swollen moon, Caspian and Garrett fought, and it was not like the fight in the apartment. That had been a lion among lambs. This was 2 ancient things, evenly matched, tearing at each other with a speed her eyes could barely follow. Garrett was old, and Garrett was ready. 100 years of preparation, silver blades, words that burned, traps folded inside of traps, and Caspian was still hurt. The wards were down, but the poison was still in him. He was losing. Mara could feel it on the grid, his thread dimming. Garrett's cold and steady and inevitable. The old hunter drove Caspian back across the landing, toward the great windows, and drew a long silver blade, and raised it for the blow he had waited a century to strike. And Mara had 1 second, maybe less. No time to reach him, no time to throw herself between them. No weapon in her hands, no centuries at her back, only the grid. So she closed her eyes, and she reached out, not toward a person this time, toward the blade, toward the taut, humming thread of Garrett's intention, the whole 100-year weight of it, aimed, ready, falling, and she grabbed it, and she did not pull it the wrong way. She wasn't strong enough for that, not against a hunter this old. But she did not have to turn the blade. She only had to make it hesitate. She seized his intention, and for 1/2 second, 1 single skipped heartbeat, she held it still. The way a hand laid flat on a bowstring holds an arrow. Not forever. Not even for a full breath. Just long enough. Garrett's blade wavered. His head turned. Something in the rhythm of 100 years' certainty stuttered. As if a thought he did not recognize had wandered into his own head. And that stutter was all Caspian needed. The king caught the hunter's wrist, the one holding the silver blade, and the 2 of them stood there, locked, straining, 100 years of hatred balanced on a single point of contact. And Caspian did not break his arm. He could have, but he didn't. Instead, bleeding, exhausted, poisoned. He looked the old hunter in the eye, and he said the only 3 words that could ever end a war that old: "I am sorry." Garrett went still. "For your brother," Caspian said, his voice barely a rasp. "He was a monster, and I killed him for it, and I would do it again. But the girl he served, the one I was too late to save, she has never once left me, not in 100 years, not 1 single night." His crimson eyes held the hunter's. "You have spent a century hunting me for a death, and I have spent that same century haunted by the one I could not prevent. We are not so different, you and I. We are just two men who could not save someone and could not forgive ourselves for the failing." And Mara, watching from the foot of the stairs, saw something in the old hunter break, not his body, the other thing, the certainty, the clean, cold hatred that had let him believe, for 100 years, that he was hunting a monster, because you can hunt a monster, but it is very, very hard to hunt a man who is sorry. Garrett looked at Caspian for a long time, the red moon washing over both their ruined faces. And then, slowly, he lowered the silver blade. "She had a name," the hunter said. "Rough. Cracked, the girl. Did you ever even learn it?" "Every night," Caspian said. "I have said it every night for 100 years," and he said it softly. So softly that Mara, at the bottom of the stairs, never quite heard it. But Garrett heard it, and whatever the name was, it was the right one, because the old hunter closed his eyes, and a single tear cut a clean line down through the grime and blood on his face, and he sheathed the blade, and he turned. And without another word, he walked down the grand staircase, past the wreckage, past Mara, out through the shattered doors, into the fading dark. He did not look back, and he never came again. The mercenaries had fled the moment the wards fell. Men who take money to hunt nightmares tend not to linger once the nightmare stands up straight. And then, as the first gray light of dawn began to bleed up over Puget Sound, it was just the two of them in the wreckage of the great hall. Broken glass and scattered salt, and the cold ash of 100 snuffed-out lights, the king and the woman who painted, and the choice, still waiting. Between them, she didn't let him speak first, because she knew that if he spoke first, he'd manage her. He'd wrap it in velvet, he'd make the cage sound like an embrace. He was so very good at that, and she was never going to be handled again, Aldous told me. About the blood, what it's doing, what it means, the 2 doors, drink or die. Caspian went white, whiter than the poison had made him. "Mara, you knew," her voice didn't rise. That was the terrible part. It stayed level, level as a held blade. "You've known since the bathroom floor. You put that inside me to save my arm, and you never told me it came with a bill. You were going to wait, weren't you? Until saying yes felt like being rescued, instead of what it actually is." "And what is it?" he whispered. "A choice you were going to make for me, by making sure I never got the chance to make it myself." And the king of the shadows, who had crossed a whole city on a promise, who had walked through silver fire for her, who had just ended a 100-year war with 3 broken words, had no answer. "Because it was true. I have watched everyone I have ever loved die," he said finally, his voice cracking down its ancient center. "For longer than you can imagine. Everyone. And then you called. With your broken arm and your iron spine and your impossible, breakable human life. And I could not do it again. I could not stand at one more grave. So yes, I hid it. Because some cowardly part of me hoped that if I never named the choice out loud, it would simply choose you. And I would never have to be the one who took your humanity. I would just get to keep you." "That's not love," Mara said, gently. Which was worse than if she had shouted it. "That's what Damon called love, a thing you keep, a thing you decide for. I ran 3 states to get away from being decided for, and I would rather die. I will actually die, Caspian, on that floor in a matter of days. Before I let anyone do it to me again." He flinched like she'd struck him. "Then tell me what you want," he said, helpless, ancient, and for the first time since she had met him, completely without an answer of his own. "Tell me what you want, and I will do it, even if it is to walk you out that door and never see your face again. Even that. Because I no longer know how to want anything that is not you." And Mara Ellison stood in the ruined hall and felt the full weight of the choice settle down onto her shoulders. And here is the thing about her that a year of being made small had almost buried, but never quite managed to kill. She made her own decision. "I'm going to drink," she said. Caspian's head came up, but not right now. She raised a hand before hope could finish crossing his face. "And not because I'm dying, and not because you decided it for me, and not to be your queen, or your pet, or a photograph of a girl you couldn't save. I'm going to drink because I choose to, because I have spent my whole life letting other people write my ending for me. Damon wrote it, my fear wrote it, and you tried to write it too. Kindly, gently, with the best intentions in the whole world, and that makes it worse." "Not better, I know," he said. "God help me, I know, so here is how it goes," and her voice was iron now, all the way through. Aldous says I have days. Fine, then you give me 3 of them. 3 days where I know exactly what is coming, and exactly what I am giving up, and I get to sit with it. I get to grieve my human life. And it mattered, even the ugly parts of it. And then when I am ready, not when I am dying, not when I am desperate, when I am ready, I will come to you, and I will ask, and you will give me the choice, all of it, out loud, in the light. And I will drink because a whole person decided to, and not 1 second before, Caspian stared at her, and something moved across his ancient face she had never seen there before. Not on the night with the hammer, not by the fire, not in the Silver Fire War, it was awe. You are not, he said slowly, what I expected. You said that the first night, a small tired ghost of a smile. On the bathroom floor, it is more true now than it was then. Good. She let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for an entire year. Then we understand each other. She took her 3 days, and she spent them living. She painted. God, how she painted. Sky's the color of everything she was about to leave behind. She called her mother in Portland. Really called her. Talked for hours. Cried. Told her a story about a new job in a new city. A fresh start. Don't worry, Mom. I'm safe now. I'm finally safe. And it wasn't a lie. Not really. Not in any of the ways that counted. She walked the cliffs at dawn. Back when the dawn was still hers to walk in, she felt the sun on her face, and she memorized it. She ate her favorite foods. She grieved. She laughed. She sat with the whole strange, enormous fact of her one wild human life. And she held it. And she let it go on her own terms. And Caspian did the hardest thing a man like him had ever done. He waited. He did not push. He did not manage. He did not wrap the cage in velvet. He watched the woman he loved walk toward a door, and he let her walk to it herself, at her own pace, and he did not reach out to hurry her along, not even once. Which is, if you have ever loved anyone at all, the very hardest form of love there is, to open your hand, and let the choice belong to them. On the 3rd night, she came to him in the library. The fire was burning, the way it had that first week, when the world had still been simple. He was in his old leather chair, and she came and stood in front of him. Calm, clear-eyed, whole, I'm ready, he rose. You're certain? No. She almost laughed. Who could be certain of a thing like this? But I'm choosing it anyway. Which is a different thing than certain. A better thing, I think. She held out her hand. Steady. Not a tremor in it. That's the whole point, isn't it? Nobody gets to be certain. We only ever get to choose, and Caspian Vale, king of the shadows of the Emerald City, who had once answered a wrong number in a storm, took her hand, and this time, when his teeth found his own wrist, when the dark iridescent blood welled up in the firelight, he did not press it to her lips. He held it out to her, and he let her take it herself, which was everything. She drank as the sun came up. There is no describing what it is to leave one world for another. The heat that started in her chest and did not stop. The way the whole city's grid, which had only ever been a whisper, roared up into a symphony she could suddenly hold entire in the palm of her mind. The way her human heart beat its last slow beat, and something older and stronger took up the rhythm in its place. She was afraid. Right up to the very end, she was afraid. But she was not decided for, and that, in the end, was everything that mattered. They stood together at the great windows as the dawn broke over Puget Sound. The storm was long gone. The water lay calm and silver under a clean pink sky, and for the first time in 100 years, the man beside her was not haunted. And for the first time in her whole young life, the woman beside him was not afraid of the dark, because she was the dark now. By choice, what happens now? She asked, her new voice. Strange and clear and entirely her own. Now the world keeps turning, Caspian said, and we keep on. But I am no longer alone in it. He looked at her, and there was no king in his face just then. No shadow. Just a very old, very tired man who had, against every odd, been given one more reason to watch the sun come up. You could have run, on the bathroom floor, in the garden, in the cellar, 100 times over. And you never once did. No, Mara said. I stopped running the night I sent the wrong number. I just didn't know it yet, and she looked out at the water, and the light, and the whole wide waiting world, because in the end, on a broken bathroom floor, and in a poisoned house, and in a war between ancient things, no one had truly saved Mara Ellison. Not the king, not the old man, not even the strange new power humming behind her eyes. The king had merely opened a door. She was the one who chose to walk through it. On her own 2 feet, with her own clear eyes, awake to every single cost, and that is the only thing that ever truly sets a person free, not being rescued, being the one who decides.